It is the very last day of lecture in this class period.
I forgot my shoe.
No more having to listen to my voice.
No, we like listening to your pipe.
Oh, that's fine. You'll listen to me because I'll keep talking. Well, some of you will listen to me. Some of you will pay attention as it is. A quick review because you missed 4 days worth of class. So if I go back here, we've been talking about government subsidies. Subsidies are payments that the government gives you because you suck. No, it's because you're poor. Okay? Well, some owners are poor. Some owners you're entitled to. Hopefully you remember that Social Security is going bankrupt, is ultimately going to fail. I hope you pay attention to that, because every single one of you is just going to give free money to the government in return for the form of Social Security tax, and then the government's going to waste that money paying for people like my grandparents. And then when you're old and you want to retire, and you ask the government for your money back, they're going to be like, sorry. We remember all this?
Yes.
Wonderful. Alright, we're talking about welfare reform a little bit. This should be a review. We've talked about this, the whole idea of the contract with America in the 1990s, and the fact that we're going to have welfare reform because welfare entitlements have gotten a little out of hand. Okay, first, I do want you to understand here that Republicans will tell you that welfare is directly linked to, and they'll just use the term linked to most of the time because that can mean any one of a number of different things, but it's linked to higher illegitimacy rates or higher rates of coming from a single family or single parent home, higher crime rate, drug usage rate, all sorts of things. Okay? Are those accurate?
Some.
Yeah, sure they are, right? Okay, but then again, there is always that old term of lies, damn lies, and statistics. Okay? Which basically means that I can make numbers say whatever I want them to. And that's an accurate statement. So can you find some sort of numerical correlation to the people that are on welfare and the people that are born to single parent families? Yes. Okay. That doesn't mean that all single mothers are on welfare. Doesn't mean any one of a number of different things. During the 1990s, we saw a massive change to the welfare and program. We've talked about this multiple times, so we're just going to sort of highlight this again since it should all be reviewed to you. Right? For instance, you can only receive welfare payments for a maximum of 5 years. You can only get 2 consecutive years of welfare payments. After that 2 years is up, you have to have been working. In order to get food stamps, you have to work. If you were an illegal alien, actually if you were legal or illegal and you were an alien, in the 90s they actually made it to where you could not apply for or receive welfare. That's not accurate anymore. If you came to this country legally and you have fallen on hard times and you are an immigrant, you are able to get welfare benefits. In some states, apparently even illegal immigrants are getting welfare benefits. And part of that is the issue that the states, via block grants, are able to control a vast majority of this. Just from a personal standpoint, I see no issue giving legal immigrants welfare, so long as they've been here. I mean, obviously, you shouldn't be able to legally come here, and then like the day you get here, be like, I want welfare. But hopefully that's not happening, right? But if they've been here for some point in time, and like everybody, you know, a series of unfortunate events occurs, no problem with it. As far as giving welfare benefits to illegal immigrants, that's basically incentivizing breaking the law, which is probably never a good idea. Probably. Another interesting requirement out of all of this is that if you give birth as a teenager, in order to receive welfare payments, you are actually required to live with your mother and attend school. Okay, now, I understand that this is the 1990s. The 1990s saw a significantly higher teen birth rate than what your generation sees. I don't, maybe your generation's just smarter than my generation was, I'm not sure. Or maybe you're more moral. Maybe not. Okay. I want you to understand that beginning in the 1990s, we began to see, that's a little redundant, isn't it? We started to see in the 90s a push, it's called a push, to change welfare, or excuse me, not welfare, to change healthcare in the United States. Alright? This probably should not come as a shock to you, simply because you have spent a significant portion of your life, or at least your cognizant life, functioning under Obamacare. Right? So it shouldn't shock you at all that healthcare reform has been something that we've looked at now for some period of time. Alright? During the Clinton administration in the 1990s, we saw a significant rise in attempts to fix the healthcare system because it was basically seen as being broken. Right? In the 90s, we basically had private healthcare that involved three parties. Alright? So here's what your healthcare involves. It involved a hospital, it involved an insurance company, and it involved you. Now, out of those three things, who's trying to make money? So basically everybody other than you. Right? Does that make sense? Everybody other than you is trying to make money off of you getting sick. So how well does that work out for you? Works very poorly. Alright? So we saw massive increases in the cost of healthcare. Alright? Now, having healthcare that is relatively expensive is a necessary sort of byproduct of having privatized healthcare. Okay? Because obviously if it's privatized, that means it's a private company whose sole responsibility in life is to make money. Alright? But we've also seen some other significant rising costs as well due to, one, more government involvement in terms of Medicare and Medicaid, okay? But two, because of increases in technology and new medicines and things like that. Those things cost considerable amounts of money, and once they have been successful, what you then see is you enter into a point where the companies that fronted all the money for the development of a new drug or for the development of some new machine that can test for something or whatever it is, they need to get all of their R&D money back, which makes the treatment for this stuff or the cost of the drug initially, it makes it very, very high. Alright? So, in addition to the rise in costs, we had a significant number of uninsured people. Alright? And uninsured people, again, that sort of adds to your general costs if you are insured. Alright? You need to realize that because you know that a hospital cannot turn somebody away, right? Do you know that fact? So if you do not have health insurance and you shoot yourself in the foot because you're a moron and you go to the ER, they have to treat you. They have to. They don't have a choice. Right? Now, the hospital's not going to lose money on that, right? Because they're a business. They ain't paying for it. Who are they going to force to pay for it? You. You will pay for it. Right? I mean, your car insurance was ridiculously high because you were all terrible drivers because you're teenagers. Okay? You know why my car insurance is high?
You're a terrible driver.
No, I'm a phenomenal driver. I've never been in an accident in my life. Okay? Because other people drive around without car insurance. And so I have to pay more because when that happens and my insurance company has another client that's hit by somebody without insurance, then my insurance company has to pay for them to fix their car. So to offset that cost, my insurance company charges me more. Hospitals do the exact same thing to you. Okay? Additionally, we have also seen drastic increases in sort of the procedures that you go through in terms of seeing a doctor, the just sort of ridiculous tests that get run in this day and age, because sadly we live in a country with a bunch of sewers. Right? honest with you, right? Because you might think that your parents are different. They probably aren't. If you went to the hospital for a checkup and you died, I'm going to bet you money that the majority of your parents would sue the doctor.
Why would you bet us money?
Because that way I can't lose my bet. Have you not realized I only make bets I know I can't lose?
That's not a bet.
Well, that's a valid statement. That's not really a bet. Because even if I did win, you couldn't pay up either. So yeah, you're right. Not a bet. But you get my point. And we live in a society now where when we are not, especially when it comes to like healthcare, when we're not 100% satisfied, we sue. Right? I mean, over some semi-ridiculous things, right? Like people have sued healthcare providers before because they had a scar after surgery. No. You had surgery and you were left with a scar? Terrible plastic surgeon. You should sue. All of that pain and suffering, that mental anguish. It's absurd. But that's the world we live in. And all of those costs get passed on to you. Alright? Other aspects of healthcare that actually increase costs, the amount of just ridiculous paperwork that it takes to get anything done. And I'm going to tell you right now, like this would not surprise me at all if we had a single payer system. Because bureaucracy is just terribly inefficient. We know, because we talked about bureaucracy in the past, there's all kinds of red tape with bureaucracy, right? But the fact that insurance companies and private hospitals require you to fill out so much paperwork in order to file a claim, in order to get an insurance company to pay for something, is sort of ridiculous. And you know why insurance companies make you do all that work? They're hoping that you get frustrated and you're like, oh, it's not worth it, dude, I'll just pay it. Whatever. They're making it intentionally difficult for you. Alright? Again, and now that, believe it or not, right, because the whole goal there is to make you not file a claim in the first place so that you just pay for things out of your own pocket. But when you have all of that paperwork and now you need additional sort of administrative personnel, what does that do to your costs? Jacks your cost up too, because now the insurance company has to pay a whole bunch of people to go through all your paperwork to ensure that you're actually filing your claim correctly if you want to be reimbursed for it. Alright? So, in the 1990s, we decided that, the Clintons decided that they were going to create healthcare reform in the United States. And Bill, in his infinite wisdom, decided that the best person for this job was Hillary. There were a lot of different options on the table. Anything from a single-payer system, which is what Bernie Sanders ran around touting about a year and a half ago, okay, to trying to increase competitions with more options, more different providers in order for them to be more cost-contained, to be more competitive. We had a policy or a proposal that would require you to require your employer to give you health insurance. Ironically, we also had a proposal that prevented your employer from giving you health insurance and just had all health insurance be 100% private. Right? And then we had a proposal for the spending, for putting caps basically on healthcare for how much it could be charged. Alright? So, the 1990s, was any of this successful? No. And the reason it was not successful is because Bill put Hillary in charge. Believe it or not, that's actually one of the predominant reasons as to why it failed. I'll be 100% honest with you, this is one of the things that I've never, ever in my entire life really understood about the Clintons. But for two people who have been in the public office for as long as the two of them have, and been in like the public eye for as long as the two of them have, both of them have a significant problem with the idea of transparency. where you actually get to know what your government officials are doing. And when Hillary took over this whole thing, right, she and a handful of people basically locked themselves in an office in the White House and went to work. And no one was allowed in. And no one knew what was going on. And do Americans like that? Well, my generation, the answer is no. No, we do not. We do not like that. Your generation's apathetic. You don't care. Right? You just don't. I'm sorry. I hate to be the one to break that to you, but do you really, any of you know what your government's doing right now? Do you care? No? In the 90s, people cared. Alright? So that's one of the reasons for it. Okay? Some of the other reasons why it was going to fail is that this was going to be an added expense upon citizens. That's never a good thing, right? If you ever want to run for office and you want to guarantee that you'll lose your election, just go ahead and admit to the people that you're going to raise taxes. They won't vote for it, I promise you. Alright? Congress was controlled at the time by Republicans, and obviously we know Republicans really don't like Hillary, or Bill, or the Clintons in general. Which is ironic, because they're kind of Republicans. Alright? And then obviously the idea of socialized medicine, right? If we say anything is socialized, I mean, Bernie Sanders claimed to be a Democrat, a socialist, what was it, Democratic Socialist?
Yes.
Or is it Socialist, no, Democratic Socialist, right?
Yes.
Right? And automatically there are people in this country that flipped out because he used the term socialist. Right? When you add socialized or socialist to anything in this country, not a fan. Alright? Whoops. So that brings us to the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare. Alright, listen, please, for the love of Jesus, do not be like the majority of stupid Americans when stopped on the side of the road and have a microphone thrust in their face, and the person goes, how do you feel about Obamacare? Like, I hate it. Man, that is so bad. Obamacare is terrible. Then they're like, how do you feel about the Affordable Care Act? Oh, that's great. That's where I get my insurance. Same thing. Just be consistent. That's all I want. If you love it, love them both. If you hate them both. Fair enough? Please, for the love of Jesus, understand that they are the same thing. Now, what is Obamacare? First, it is a mandate. You must have insurance. You have to. And if you choose, because this is America and we live in a freedom, right? A free country, you have all sorts of freedoms, right? If you exercise your freedom to not have health insurance, you pay a penalty. I mean a tax, sorry. Not a penalty. A tax. Okay? A little bit different. Government's allowed to tax you. They cannot penalize you for not buying something. But they can tax you. Alright? So you are required to have health insurance. If you cannot afford health insurance, there are actually insurance subsidies now. Okay? So Obamacare helps you pay for your insurance if you can't afford it. Private businesses are required to provide you with insurance with a couple of stipulations. One, got to be a full-time employee. And if I remember correctly, they say that full-time is 30 hours a week or more. And additionally, the employer must have 50 or more employees to be required. Now, if I start my own company and I got 40 employees, I could choose to give them health insurance if I wanted to. Right? But the day I hire my 50th employee is the day Obamacare says I have to give them all health insurance. Right? You absolutely have to. Which is why a number of small business owners basically fired a bunch of people after Obamacare to get down to 49 employees. That's an accurate statement. Okay? Or they cut back a bunch of people's hours to where they worked 28 hours a week so that they were no longer full-time, and therefore they didn't have to be given health insurance. And these are accurate statements. There are people that did that. Right? And that's why I've told you before, when you go back and you look at some of the data about, like, job growth. Job growth in the last year, we added 185,000 new jobs in the month of February. What kind of jobs? Part-time, minimum wage. Because we actually incentivize companies to not hire people full-time. Probably not the smartest thing to do, but it is what it is. Now, with all of this, we did see a massive decrease in the number of Americans that were uninsured. A massive decrease. Okay? In fact, we got down to about 10 million, which there's what, 325, 330 million people in this country? 10 million uninsured, that's really good. That's really low. Alright? Obviously, it's not perfect, it's not ideal, but it's very low. Right? And that's better than the alternative where you had much, much higher numbers. Now, all of that being said, with Obamacare, what we have seen over the last 2 years, basically, are rising costs. In some cases, significantly rising costs. You see higher premiums, higher co-pays. You've seen a lack of competition. The exchanges, there are now a number of, a significant, like 1/3 of the United States, is now basically down to one option for health insurance, which obviously limits competition and allows insurance companies to sort of drive up price a little bit. Republicans will tell you that Obamacare needs to be, well, they'll tell you it needs to be repealed and replaced. At this point, I'm still not sure what that means. But even Democrats will admit to you at this point that Obamacare is flawed and needs to be fixed, at least in some way. Right? I don't know that it's sustainable as it is. Alright, so that brings us to foreign policy, our very last concept. Right? Now, here's the first thing that you need to know. Okay? Foreign policy is officially a shared responsibility between the executive branch, the President of the United States, and the legislative branch, Congress. That makes sense? Who declares war? Congress. Who ratifies treaties? The Senate. Right? Who confirms ambassadors? The Senate. Okay? We'll stop right there. Because in reality, Congress does not deal with foreign policy. Okay? Do you think that Donald Trump went and met with congressmen before he went and dropped the mother of all bombs on Afghanistan? What?
That's been planned. It's been planned for like months. Like I think Obama signed off on it.
Oh, okay. Do you think Obama met with Congress first? No. I promise you it didn't happen. Regardless, neither one of them are going to meet with Congress. And because when it comes to foreign policy, the president, that's a lie. The executive branch generally acts unilaterally. And even though we sort of have this premise of it being a shared responsibility between the executive and legislative branches, we understand that the executive branch is ultimately the one that's doing it. And I mean, Trump is the one who made the decision to bomb Syria after the chemical weapons attack. He did not go to Congress and be like, hey, got an idea, I want to see if you're all right with it. Because he didn't care. And as Americans, we don't care that he didn't do it. We really don't. We look at that as being the sole responsibility of the President of the United States. Right? Maybe, hopefully with some input from Rex Tillerson and General Mattis. Right? But that's kind of the extent of what we expect. Right? We know who Tillerson is? Tillerson is Secretary of State. Okay, that's the guy who's currently going around the world trying to figure out what he's actually supposed to do in his job. And I don't mean that to be funny, or I don't mean that to be a knock on him. The man had zero experience in government. I mean, less than Trump even. He was a private corporate. I mean, he ran a private corporation. Was CEO of a company whose really only sort of international concern was economics. And so I think that he's trying to figure out as best he can what his real responsibilities and role in the government is as Secretary of State. And hopefully he'll figure it out quickly. I think he's a fairly bright guy. But there's a significant learning curve for somebody who has never been in government and never negotiated on behalf of a country. All right. But the Secretary of State is officially the head of Foreign Affairs. Right? So in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, Tillerson has been in Moscow meeting with his Russian counterpart and Vladimir Putin. He has been to China. He has been, I'm pretty sure he went to South Korea, didn't he? But I mean, he's essentially going all over the world as sort of a global ambassador, really, and that's a part of his responsibility. Okay. There are other cabinet officials that play a role in foreign policy, right? General Mattis is Secretary of Defense, for instance. So obviously, I would hope, I really would. I don't know whether or not he was consulted prior to bombing Syria or not. I'll be honest with you, based on the way the bombing occurred, my assumption is Mattis was not consulted. I don't know that for a fact. I'm operating on that assumption because Mattis is a Marine, and so I doubt that he would bomb a runway and still leave it operational. Because I don't think Mattis is the type of guy that sends messages like that. From what I know about him, he's the type of guy that if you make him mad, he's just going to kill you. Treasury Department deals with foreign affairs because we give trillions of dollars away every year in foreign aid. Don't ask me why. I've asked myself that question for years and I can't figure it out. The National Security Council plays a significant role in foreign affairs. These are the people that meet regularly, that go over, as it sounds, basic security issues. Okay? There's been a long-standing tradition of the people that actually sit on this council, right? So the Vice President of the United States, as well as like the head of the CIA and Secretary of Defense and people like that. This is the council that Donald Trump put Bannon on for like 2 months and then just recently kicked him off of, for whatever reason. Alright? The National Security Advisor, this is somebody who has become very, very prominent in foreign affairs now. This was originally going to be General Flynn, although he had to quit over ties to Russia. And so now is it Admiral? Is that what McMaster's was?
Admiral Colonel.
No, he would have been a colonel. I don't think Trump would have appointed a colonel. That's beneath Trump. He would have had to have at least been a general. I think he was an admiral. I think he was a Navy guy though. But I want you to understand that the National Security Advisor, it shouldn't surprise you that the National Security Advisor is a larger role player in all of this now, because the National Security Advisor is a member of what? Is that a cabinet position? Kyle, what is it then?
It's just part of his advisory council.
White House staff,
Yeah.
right? And we talked about this. Okay, who does a president rely on more in this day and age? White House staff or his cabinet? Staff. Because they have no other loyalties. Alright? Department of Homeland Security, obviously they're looking for anti-terrorism stuff. So they're a part of it. And then the Director of National Intelligence, which is another sort of relatively new thing. It's supposed to, basically it's supposed to take like the CIA and the FBI and the NSA and all sorts of agencies that gather information and consolidate all that information, because sadly in the United States for the longest period of time, the CIA and other organizations didn't actually talk to one another when they figured things out. which sounds terrible, but hey, you really shouldn't be surprised because that's bureaucracy. All right. The CIA used to be really prominent in terms of foreign affairs. They're not quite as prominent anymore because it is now apparently frowned upon in this political climate to assassinate world leaders. But the CIA used to do that regularly. Seriously. Right? The CIA actually assassinated a guy from New Jersey who was the president of South Vietnam. Remember that whole conversation? We found a Vietnamese dude who was Catholic, living in Jersey, made him president of South Vietnam. He sucked, so we killed him. Good morning, Baker. I did. Absolutely. Bang him. Anson, go to CFS. So the CIA is basically a foreign intelligence gathering operation. It came out of the OSS, which is the Office of Strategic Services, which was a World War II created organization. Right? So basically the OSS existed solely during World War II in order to spy on our enemies. And the CIA basically becomes the peacetime equivalent of that. Right? They have all sorts of operations over the course of time. And yeah, they've done a handful of just wildly shady stuff. Most of it is unconfirmed, right? As it probably should be. We don't need the world knowing that we go around and kill other leaders. And again, don't do this anymore. Because I promise you, if the CIA was still in the business of killing world leaders, Assad, not be around today. Right? They would have taken him out already. And they might have tried to take a shot at Putin. Wouldn't shock me. But that's a little tougher.
Really not. I wouldn't kill Kim Jong-un.
What?
Would they get Kim Jong-un or would they?
Probably not.
Probably not.
There's no point in taking him out.
Why?
Well,
At least for
okay,
target
maybe
practice.
within the last 4 or 5 months, maybe. But prior to 6 months ago, Kim Jong-un was a joke. That's all he was. He was a fat little man in a starving country that you made fun of. Right? You made fun of him because literally he's the only fat kid in his entire country.
He's the only one that eats over there, and they don't.
Sure, I'm sure that's why he's the only fat kid there. Okay? But I mean, literally up until 6 months ago, I've always referred to Kim Jong-un as a kid. Because I have that little respect for that man. Okay? He's a man baby. That's what he is. Right? Now, in the last 6 months, is he beginning to pose an actual threat? Yeah. Right? But up to 6 months ago, he wouldn't be worth the bullet. He wouldn't have. Right? I mean, the CIA is not going to take him out because it's a waste of time. It's a waste of time and it's a waste of energy. Alright? Oh, we need to go over to the NSA. I don't know, do we really need to go over it that much, in that much detail? You know, this is the organization that I yell at you about all the time, that's spying on you, that you don't care about.
We care, but
You don't really care. Leave that crap, please. You don't really. I'm telling you guys, if you really cared, you would do something about it. Okay? You would go and you would have protests and things like that. There are other, much smaller foreign policy players, people that are involved in what's going on, anything from interest groups to think tanks. I do also want you to understand that foreign nations actually hire lobbyists that live in Washington, D.C. and basically ask our government to do things for them, right? So a good example would be Paul Manafort, who had a small role in the Trump campaign. He was the campaign chairman. He is now registering as a foreign lobbyist, I want to say for the Ukraine, is that right? I think that's who he's lobbying for. Flynn used to lobby for Turkey, Denmark, a couple of other countries. but it's not something that's outside of the sort of political norm. Like it happens regularly, right? I mean, obviously, let's take Turkey as an example, right? Is Turkey our ally?
Kind of.
They are. Okay. What's the predominant religion in Turkey? Islam, right? So I'm sure that Turkey lobbies in part to make sure that they're not getting lumped in with other sort of hostile Islamic nations, right? I mean, we had ballistic missiles in Turkey during the Cuban Missile Crisis, like pointed at Moscow and St. Petersburg and places like that in the 60s and 70s, well, 50s and 60s, right? Turkey actually used to be a fairly large ally of the United States, all right? And I don't really care about political parties, and I don't care about Congress, because, yeah, they do these things, but like I told you, they don't do a whole lot. So there you go. All right, Congress basically just ratifies some treaties from time to time. So wonderful. That's the end of lecture.